So today what we're going to talk about is the quadratic formula. We are going to take what we just did last week and just quizzed over, and we are going to expand upon it. We're going to use the way of solving for a variable, simplifying radicals, to solve for x when we have an x squared. So one thing we did not tell you in the last couple days is that anytime you have an x squared, you have two answers. So whenever we've had x equals, we've always had one answer. So this square means you have two answers. So in the 11.3, we had x squared, let's say, equals 121. How we solved this is we took the square root. But really, if you put 11 in parentheses squared, that gives you 121. But if you also put negative 11 in parentheses squared, that also gives you 121. So x can equal, because we know on our calculators, if you do second x squared, 121, and close your parenthesis, that gives us 11. It's a whole number that we can have positive 11 or we can have negative 11. So every time from here on out, you need to give us two answers. Sometimes they will look nice like this, or sometimes they will have a decimal. So the quadratic formula is the solution or x-intercepts, we're going to call them solutions, answers, of the quadratic equation. Now the quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, this is where a, b, and c are all numbers. Okay, we are going to use this formula here. This is the quadratic equation. I'm sorry, quadratic formula. And it reads x equals opposite of b plus or minus, this right here is where that two answers comes in, the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by everything that you just read over 2a. Now it says let's have a sing-along. I like to relate this formula to Pop Goes the Weasel. So let's listen to it. So what you just heard is putting the quadratic formula to Pop Goes the Weasel. For me, personally, it helped me remember it. So if you want to help yourself remember it, just go on YouTube and type in quadratic formula Pop Goes the Weasel. So the most important thing you need to know about the quadratic formula is actually how to set it up. So the first thing we're going to do is identify those A, B, and C values. And they are the numbers in front of your variables. But remember, we always have to take the sign in front as well. So remember, it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. A has a value of 1. Remember, if nothing is there, it's 1. B has a value of negative 6. And C has a value of positive 5. So what we're going to do is we are going to put this in that huge, gigantic quadratic formula. So it always starts with x equals. And we need to put this in a fraction. So go ahead and draw your fraction bar. It needs to be nice and big. The first step of the quadratic formula is opposite b. So this means if it's ever positive or negative, you take the opposite sign. So we go to b and we see negative 6. The opposite of negative 6 is a positive 6. Then we're going to say plus or minus the square root. That never changes. So your opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared. Okay, a lot of times when we substitute in, we put things in parentheses. It's very important we use these parentheses because we need to include the negative. So b squared, negative 6 squared, minus 4 times a times c. Okay, this is the formula I'm rewriting. Minus 4 times a, and if we look at our a value, we know it's 1, times c, which is 5. This is all over 2 times a. 2 times a, and a is 1. So this is how you set it up. Basically, all you are doing is taking your values of a, b, and c and putting them into the spots that they need to go. Okay, so let's try another one. We're looking for a, b, and c. If they are in descending order, x squared, x, no variable, then all you do is just go right along the line. 1, positive 9, negative 2. So we're going to go back to this formula here again. X equals opposite of b. Since this time b is positive, it's going to be negative 9. Opposite of b. Plus or minus square root of b squared, 9 squared, minus 4 times a times c. A is 1, c is negative 2. And this is all over 2a. So that's how we set it up. Now what we're going to do is actually solve. And we have 2 to solve. Okay, so the first one you're going to see, let's set it up again. A is 1, B is 4, C is negative 5. So if we go ahead and set this up, X equals opposite B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Okay, so if you remember, all of our A's are 1, all of our B's are yellow, and then all of our C's are blue. Okay, everything else is the normal piece of the formula. So what we're going to do first is we're going to simplify what's underneath the square root. Okay, so all we're going to do right now is rewrite everything but what's underneath the square root. Okay, so see how I haven't filled that in? What we're going to do is you should have a calculator that looks like the one on my screen here in front of you. All we're going to do is type what's underneath the square root. We are not including the square root yet. So whatever is highlighted. So you would do your parentheses, and your parentheses are right here above 8 and 9. Okay, so you would say parentheses 4, close your parentheses, squared, and your squared button is just diagonal from 7, minus 4 times 1, close your parentheses, open another one, negative 5. Your negative button is here down at the bottom. That's not subtraction, it's negative. If you get an error, it means that you used your subtraction key. Okay? Once you have this typed in, hit enter. Okay? And so that's the number that goes right here underneath your square root, 36. Just for quadratic formula, we're going to allow decimal answers. Okay? If you take the square root of this, and to take the square root, you hit the second key, it's blue or yellow on your calculator, and then the x squared key. Okay, and your square root symbol should show up, and then you type 36 because that's what we just found. So we're going to now add the square root into our computations and put it into our calculator and hit enter, and you get 6. So now we have negative 4 plus or minus 6 divided by, do we know what 2 times 1 is? We better, it's 2. Okay, here's where the tricky part goes. We now have to somehow use this plus or minus. Remember in the very beginning, I talked to you about how to solve a problem with the x squared. We now have two answers. So we're going to take this and write two different equations. You're going to say x equals -4 plus 6, so we're using the top piece, divided by 2. And we're going to say x equals -4 minus 6 divided by 2. Okay, so if we go ahead and simplify, we would have -4 plus 6 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So that's one of our answers. X is 1. And then -4 minus 6 is -10 divided by 2, which gives us -5, and that's our second answer. Okay, so the biggest part of this is setting it up and then knowing how to simplify. So let's try one more. Okay, here our A is 4, our B is -6, and our C is 1. So we would say x equals opposite of b, so it's negative, so it's now positive, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, so remember, we're going to just take what's inside the square root and type it into our calculators. So parentheses, the negative key, remember, is down all the way at the bottom. 6, close your parentheses, squared, minus 4, open your parentheses, times 4, close it, open another one, times 1. Okay, and this gives us 20. So now we have x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 20 all over, let's do this 2 times 4. What's 2 times 4? If you said 8, you're correct. Okay, so this is going to be a decimal. So let's go ahead and do second square root 20, close your parentheses, and hit enter. This is a lot of decimals. Let's round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so you look at the 7 and know you have to round up. So we have x equals 6 plus or minus. Okay, so we just put this whole thing right here into our calculator, and we got 4.5 divided by 8. This is where we have to now create the two equations. Okay, so when you create the two equations, you're going to have 6 plus 4.5 divided by 8, and you're going to have 6 minus 4.5 divided by 8. So when we add 6 plus 4.5, we have 10.5 divided by 8. And if we want to get a nice decimal, we would say 10.5 divided by 8, and you get 1.3. And then over here, 6 minus 4.5 is 1.5 divided by 8. And so again, go back to your calculators, 1.5 divided by 8, and that gives you 0.2. X equals 0.2. Okay, I know I went a little fast on that one, but I was running out of time. We will spend one more day on this, so please make sure that you are trying the in-class practice and your homework. The quiz is a paper quiz, so please ask your teacher for that.